Okay, this is episode number 5 of Esports Salon, and the general topic of the show is going to be women in esports, and I'm obviously Thorin, the usual host, and my guests for this episode, I will go in the order of the boxes, going right and then down to the left. They don't know where they are, obviously, at the moment. So in the box to my right is missharvey, and she is, as I'm often told, a 5-time world champion of female Counter-Strike from 1.6 through to now. She still plays CSGO, and she is plays for CLG Red. In the box on the bottom right corner, and by the fact that she's a cartoon, I think you probably guess she isn't going to be talking at the moment. I don't have that sort of budget to animate cartoons, so it's going to be Requine, who is a writer. She's a staff writer at the moment for Immortals, and she writes about esports. And in the bottom left box is masq, and she was a pro player on like a lower level in the male scene. And like when I did a bit of my research, she played, for example, in a tournament that had a team where you would actually now know some of the names. At the time, they were kind of nobodies, but like Rush, Slemmy, Valens, the coach now of TSM. Well, it was at one point in time, Automatic. So she played with some decent men. And obviously the premise is women in esports. And so what I wanted to do was have I realize this has now become a word that actually triggers me, but a fairly diverse panel of people to talk with. So the concept was missharvey is a current pro, and we all have our perspective on how she feels about this particular topic, and some of her opinions are well publicized in the media of all kinds, apparently. And masq was playing on a decent level herself, but actually was primarily trying to go into just any kind of tournament. She wasn't particularly playing in female tournaments, and it hasn't particularly become famous as like a female pro in that sense. And actually posted, this is one of the reasons why she caught my eye, was she posted a comment in a thread about this very topic, equality or inequality in gaming. And she had some perspective that was actually closer to a lot of what I've seen a lot of the men argue. So I wanted to put these two people in here. And then the third person, Requine, is because, first of all, she's an esports journalist, so she's been around the scene. She's actually watched some of the esports side, so I felt like she wouldn't be lost necessarily once you get out of the part just about women playing games. But as she would tell you, she's someone who's played games herself, has been a gamer for a long time anyway. So I thought it would be interesting to have not just pros, but also someone who's just played games and then can relate the every day-to-day experience and then give their comment as an outsider, but without just me being the only outsider. And funnily enough, people will think cynically that I've just put together the show with women because the topic is women in esports. But actually, as bizarre as it sounds, it's almost coincidental that they are women and I've chosen them for the show. And the reason why I say that is because I actually tried to think, was there any male figure who had some like deep connection with also the female scene and knew about the issues, whether pro or con, that they'd gone through? And I couldn't really think of anyone who was really connected in that way, because most of the people who are in esports, it's an area where one of the reasons I wanted to have the discussion is it's actually not really been discussed. What happens is there's a bunch of people who have different opinions. Every few months they come out, they say their opinions, which are quite quite different. There's no real discussion. There's no back and forth. One side just says to the other side, you're wrong, and here's my opinion. And there's never really any actual discussion. So a lot of the people, even I know from esports, who are aware of female gaming, they have fairly simplistic views on it as well, Even if they say something I might agree with, it's not very nuanced, There's not a lot you could actually discuss about it. So I thought this was a panel of people where we could actually have a proper discussion. Because one thing I don't particularly like is people thinking that you have to debate topics where people disagree. Because then the idea becomes like you're trying to win the debate and you're just trying to say that the other person's wrong in every sense. You don't want to give any ground up. Whereas if you have a discussion, you can discuss something and someone can make a good point, and you don't have to be like, well, I'll have to pretend that wasn't a good point so I can win the debate. So I want to just have a discussion about this topic. And so I have one rule at the beginning of the show for everyone who's on the show right now. This is one rule. And it's a very easy rule to follow if you are, in fact, a human being. So the rule is to give your own opinions and to say what you actually think. Do not give rhetoric that you read, that someone said that sounded like a really cool opinion, and a stat that you never researched, but someone said it and it sounds really compelling. That is the kind of nonsense which holds up all discussion I was talking about before, because people just start spewing off a bunch of stuff they've heard that they think's cool, and then they never want to engage the discussion. So I want people to give their real thoughts on this stuff. And we'll start with this topic, okay? So because obviously the thing that prompted this was the BBC did an article recently with an attached video, which Miss Harvey here was involved with, where they discussed whether there's like inequality in gaming, in esports specifically for women. And one of the things they did in this piece that was, I thought, a bit problematic, however you feel about the topic, was they tried to sort of connect what it's like for women to just play games, multiplayer games, with women also trying to be professionals in games. And there's obviously a lot of nuances, a lot of difference between the two things. And I feel like that's what bogs down a lot of these discussions. Like, for example, you ask someone about women in gaming, and then they say stuff like, oh, but they're getting abuse all the time. You know, something that's like, well, are they actually getting abuse from male pros? And, that's like a more interesting question. So let's start in this area. Let's just start with general women in gaming, okay? Before we get into the esports part, we'll progress to that at some point. So, Miss Harvey, let me start with you. You are someone who's played a long time. I think longer than anyone else in this group chat, as far as I know, apart from me, of course. And as someone who's played a long time, just as outside of the esports part, not when you're competing in tournaments, when you were just playing Counter-Strike in public servers, or you're playing in gathers, or you're playing in some setting that in theory any woman who's even vaguely competent could play in if they came into the scene. What was your overall experience like? How would you describe it?
Well, like, I don't know what it is in 2016. My experience was in 2003 playing in pubs and stuff. So back then, like, even the gaming as a whole wasn't 50-50 like it is today. So I was I was standing out if I ever used my mic or if people knew who I was. Absolutely. Okay. Like, whether I was getting trashed on or giving a lot of attention because boobs, I would stand out. That's why that's how I would describe it.
Okay. And as you started to get a bit more serious, were people even who were in some level good at the game, were they resistant as well? Was it a similar experience with the people initially getting into the competitive side as it was on just general servers?
No, I got the attention of pros really fast. And that's how I think my CS career was extremely catapulted because I was really good friends with good players, which made me a better player real fast, and which obviously back in the days it was a little different with IRC and that kind of stuff. Yeah. But it gave me a platform to, I guess, succeed easier then, because there wasn't all this YouTube comments and Twitter and this harassment mechanism that we have today. Kind of, okay. It didn't have the social media weren't there before. So, I was just one of the boys with retention. I guess I don't know. It was a little different. It's really hard to compare it to what it is today. You know?
Sure, yeah. You're just trying to set a baseline of what people's initial experiences were like. Okay, so Requine. Yeah. What was it like for you coming into games? First of all, what were the initial games that you actually played when you were doing online, multiplayer games?
So when I was growing up, my father would refuse to buy PCs. He had this huge bias against PC gaming, for not PC gaming, but PCs in general. Okay. Not sure why, actually. So we had Macs, and that meant we had Blizzard games in the house, and only Blizzard games. Okay. So when I was 8 years old, we had StarCraft. And, I immediately got into StarCraft. I had played games before, but this was the first competitive game that I'd ever played besides on a couch with my brothers. And, I was a kid, but immediately I was addicted to it, and the social aspects of it were really minimal back then. You didn't have people having sort of communities outside the game. It was all built into the game itself, and people mostly just talked about the game and improving, climbing the ladder, and so on. And, from there I got into Warcraft 3, and I sort of saw how communities started to really grow, and people started bringing their own personal side into things, how people started to build communities based off, making friends and getting to know each other on a personal level and sort of being open about, oh, I'm a woman, oh, I have this going on in my life. And so the early days were honestly kind of extremely innocent and idyllic compared to now, I'd say, where there was, I don't even remember a substantial amount of harassment back then, honestly.
Okay. Right, masq, what was your initial kind of engagement with the competitive gaming side of things? What was that like?
So I never really started with CS or CSGO until in 2014, 2013, but me playing back like games like Orange Box games like, you know, TFC and Day of Defeat, like all those FPS games, I never really experienced, or maybe I was just too fortunate to not have gone through maybe the same harassment that maybe other females have gone through, because I never strictly identified myself as a female. I never put it out there that I was a female. I just purely focused on the game, and maybe that helped me not to, you know, go through the same, you know, harassment that maybe other females went through, but I didn't see it as much of a problem playing competitively. Like, I never thought that, hey, these people are treating me differently because of my gender. I always thought of it in terms of, hey, these people are treating me differently because maybe I just suck, or I need to get better, or maybe I'm just not the right person to play with them.
Okay, so
it's actually interesting because I regret having Miss in my alias.
Okay.
Like,
so that's a question I have for you then. Let me put it this way. So missharvey, let me ask you this.
Yeah.
So this is another area where if people ever make this point, like, you know, why identify yourself as a woman?
Yeah.
Unfortunately, the counter to it has a basis, but it's just not very helpful, which is people say like, well, I shouldn't have to, you know, I should be allowed to comment. Yeah, sure, in an ideal world. But, I mean, we don't live in an ideal world, right? So if you were called Bill Harvey and you didn't talk on the mic, probably wouldn't get the same abuse, right? Which doesn't mean that the abuse is justified, but it should. Here's the question then. If you identify as a woman, and I'm assuming a lot of people do, just because, I mean, a lot of people are very naive when they first go on the internet, you know, the first name they pick might not be the best name. Yeah. If you identify as a woman, is that what you think initially draws the harassment? It's not necessarily the level of play?
Yeah, I actually really regret having Miss in my name, like I was saying. I was 17, picked an alias, didn't know that it would be a brand, you know? And then still today, if I deathmatch or practice on my own, I just use RV. I don't put Miss. Still today, after 14 years. I just don't like being pointed as this Miss person because it does create issues, good or bad. I just want a game, you know? So yeah, I actually regret having Miss.
Okay. So Requine, did you pick names that made it clear or could give a hint that you were a woman or a female?
When I started, like I said, I was about 8 when I started competitive gaming online, so I think my parents made sure I was using like super boring usernames.
Okay.
It was actually in League of Legends that I started picking my own names and sort of being old enough to sort of have no parental supervision. And yeah, I chose a name that sort of Queen, which spectacularly feminine, but it does sort of sound like it. You know, I would jump into voice chat channels when people were doing pickups or whatever. And I've tried never to really hide it because, I mean, it's so core to my identity that hiding it is just such a pain. And is it smarter? I think it probably is smarter. I just don't really want to.
Okay. So, okay, before we go into like the topic of the specifics of gaming and how women can get into the pro side and what the pro scene is structured like, I actually wanted to just get everyone's perspective on the basic concept of, are there differences between men and women that either make them have different strengths in games or make, for example, in this scenario, the obvious question would be women not able to compete with men. So I'd go on and by the way, obviously, as far as I know, none of us here are like biologists or any sort of social scientists, so we aren't experts. I just want to know what people's general thoughts are. So, missharvey, do you think on the physical level, like actual biology, like what a woman's body is like or what their brain is made up of, do you actually get the sense from your experiences that there is some core difference between men and women that in any way changes how they play the game of Counter-Strike, for example?
Yes. I've read a study about, well, I can't quote it, so you might be mad at me because I'm
just go ahead. It's all opinions. Yeah.
I've read a study, and it tinted my opinion, I guess, and now I actually believe it. I read a study about biologically how men have like faster reflexes, have better spatial awareness, have all these kind of stuff that in Counter-Strike would 100% make a man a better player than a female if they were equivalent. On like all levels, which from that day had really made me think about, hey, you know what? For so long in video game in the industry, it was man making games. Like still today, when I worked at Ubisoft last year, there's only 15% female working on the games in a 3,000 people office. So if men are making games, they're going to make something that probably pushes game male skill sets, like for esports, which mean it will help the men get better. So it's a circle. So I do believe that by having a better diversity within the gaming companies that create the game, it will help like new games become esports, which will help the demographic, which is female, get as good as men. Does that make sense? Am I making sense right now?
I understand your argument. I'll say that much. Okay, so
but
keep going.
I don't know if I don't know if it's actually true or not. Like you said, we only history will be able to lead us there. But I do believe it. I do believe there's differences.
Okay.
And whenever I hear the argument, well, it's just a mental game. Like it's no physical. I never really reply because I can't back it up, but I disagree. I think
okay. Right.
I don't think these game developers though are pushing their any sort of agenda though. Like when it comes to developing games specifically for men.
Yeah, I don't think they're either.
It just happens that this is what they're interested in, and traditionally men are, more involved in say CS:GO, games that have to do with war. More men are in combat positions. It was only recently that women were able to get into combat positions. So it's not that they're pushing their agenda. It's just this is what they've, this is what they're interested in.
Okay. What do you think, masq? Do you think there are actually physical differences?
I do believe there are differences, but I think that they're minimal at most because genetics could be a factor, and I'm not too equipped to make a discussion on this because I'm not too familiar with the research.
Sure, just more in your own experience,
Yeah,
if you
so
saw
in my
the men
own
playing,
experience,
so.
I think everyone is first I don't think the differences are enough to warrant that there's a handicap.
Okay.
But all in all, everyone is born unequal. Everyone develops their skills at different paces and in different ways, whether it's because of they're interested in the game or it's just natural born skill. But looking at the current players now, no two professionals are alike in the skill sets that they have developed to reach the top, because it's just more than just aim or raw talent. There's professionals who rely on their intellect. There's professionals who rely on just being gay players, trying to just annoy the other team. Different players have different skill sets that they try to emphasize in how they play so that they could be successful in their own way.
Okay. What do you think, Requine? What do you think there are physical differences?
Yes, but I'm not sure how much of an impact they had. This is somewhat related. They did a study on older players. I want to say older players over 23, 25. And they found that, older players don't have the reflexes, but they do have better decision making, and so they balance out. And I do think there are probably similar differences between men and women. Women might not have the superior reflexes. They might not have better spatial awareness, but they might have some other mental bonus that we're not aware of, right? Because I don't think there's a lot of research on it. I don't think it's a popular thing to research. And so I don't think we really have the whole picture of what it would look like, especially in esports. I don't think it's a popular thing to study. I think results are kind of controversial.
Yeah. You both bring a good point that it's true. I don't know if actually it makes a difference. Yeah. But...
Yeah, because there's a lot of aspects of the game, right? Let's say hypothetically this is not a real result. Let's say they found out that women just work better with their team and don't require as much in-team communication as a man does, right? That would definitely be an in-game advantage. Would it balance out the reflexes advantage? I feel like that probably could happen. We just don't know. We don't have the whole picture.
Okay. So, then the other aspect is, this is obviously actually the hardest one to determine, because the difference is, for physical stuff, you could have a scientist who happens to not be working on gaming, but he could just find a difference between men and women, and then you could apply it, like you're saying with the study that you found, Stephanie. But the bigger issue, and this is probably the hardest one to unravel, is whether there's either some kind of psychological difference between men and women, or some kind of cultural difference that is somehow changing the way they play the game or the way they think of the game. I mean, what is your thought on this, missharvey?
Actually, okay, so here's how I'm gonna approach this question. I don't know if that's true, but what I know is every single woman that I've played on a team with and competed at a very high level. We were all extremely stubborn, extremely motivated, and extremely driven to compete and win, which I think is something that qualifies most of the men in esports. Like I've never played with a weak female, like someone that doesn't stand up for themselves, that doesn't have an opinion, like and to make it into competition so far with any girls that I've played with, we're all extremely strong women. I don't like to use the word strong women because it's so vague, but this is how I'm going to describe it best right now. So if you think about all these guys competing, is it like something that is naturally stronger within men, like the testosterone and the desire to compete? I always felt that it was something that men wanted more, and that female were more like social creatures. So that's why like girls play games, because it's a good way to express your socialness or whatever. But as far as competing in that desire to like fight each other, it was more always biologically throughout history, like a man's thing, right? So that's my thought on it. So I do believe that maybe psychologically there's something there regarding why there isn't that many female in the esports, and not just in gaming overall.
Okay. Masq, what do you think then? I mean, you've played obviously with men as well, so what is your sense for this?
Yeah, I wouldn't go as far as to say that all women are social creatures, or that I guess, let me see. Here, come back to me on that one.
Okay. Requine, come on, hit me.
Okay, I have a lot of thoughts on this, actually. This is sort of something I've been thinking about a lot. So if I'm talking too much, just tell me to shut up. So I think a lot of it is in early childhood. How we're raised in our early childhood affects so much about us. On your huge video, about women in esports, the response to the BBC, you brought up a chess player. Her name was, I believe, Judith Polgar. I'm not 100% on that, so forgive me if I'm wrong. And what's interesting is Judith Polgar is a chess grandmaster. She's arguably the most accomplished woman in chess ever. Very competitive, 12-hour practice days. Her father was a psychologist, and her father was like, I really want to know what makes a competitor, what makes a chess grandmaster. Is it nurture or is it nature? And you are not allowed to have long-term tests on children. You can't do that. That's unethical. So he had his own children. He had 3 daughters, and he raised them all from birth to be chess grandmasters. He succeeded. All 3 of his girls are in the chess grandmaster list. They were all raised from a very young age to be capable of that, to compete those 12-hour days, to strive for that. It succeeded, right? And I don't think many girls would. Obviously, esports is different. It's a whole different game. But, how many girls, for instance, right, get a game console or an easy bake oven? How many girls get sort of very strong infrastructure at a young age that pushes them to compete, that pushes them even just to play? I know a lot of girls, right? Like, it's not a very cool thing for a young girl to spend 8 hours a day playing a game and emerge from the sweaty to do it all again tomorrow. Like, that's seen as really socially unusual.
Your example is amazing. My dad was a sport competitor. He played in the NHL hockey league, like some small hockey league in Canada and the States. And he's the one that bought me games when I was really young. So I was raised with games, and I didn't know it was like a boy thing back then. And he was a fierce competitor, and that's how I was raised, to compete. So like your example is amazing.
Yeah, I had 3 older brothers, right? And we had a GameCube, and we'd play Mario Party. And nothing will piss you off more and make you want to win more than Mario Party. That game's bullshit. We had Smash Brothers. We played StarCraft against each other. We were constantly competing, and it got really heated at times, right? And how many girls just don't have that environment? And I think another thing is games have really transitional skill sets. So, like, let's say you're 4 and you play Mario. You understand animations. You learn about hitboxes, right? You learn about maps and how they change. You learn about character differences.
Okay.
If you give an 18-year-old person who has never played a video game before a controller or a keyboard and mouse and say, get to it, they're going to be lost. They're not going to get it. Just basic concepts are just going to bewilder the hell out of them. So, for instance, when I want to say like 7, 8, I picked up Super Mario 64, which was the first 3D Mario game. And my head couldn't wrap around it. I just couldn't do it. And, I tried to get my mom to play Portal. She couldn't do it either. Like, I think we take for granted how difficult it is to get into this genre of just computer games in general. Unless you're sort of really dedicated to get over those hurdles or introduced at a young age when your brain is just super absorbent.
Sure. Right,
Yeah,
Masq.
the first time I played Counter-Strike, I couldn't figure out how to aim.
Yeah.
So-
Okay, Masq, you have something for me?
All right. Yeah. So I guess in addition to what Cass had said, to the lack of exposure to gaming while growing up, in addition to that, psychologically, if you have people telling you the industry is against you and you are a victim because the demographics are unequal or there's like a lack of female representation, in the back of the mind, whether you're headstrong or not, you're always going to have that question as to whether, hey, maybe I'm not good enough because everybody's against me, rather than I'm not good enough because I'm just not good enough as an individual. So by pushing that, I mean, it's not doing any good for females trying to get into the scene if people are constantly telling them that they're victims and the industry and everything is against them.
Sure. I mean, actually, this is one area where I actually do agree with a lot of the arguments. Obviously, that naturally a lot of them come from women because they're from personal experience. That the reason why there aren't as many women play is actually purely because when they're young, it's not something that they do or that people suggest to them. Because the way I would describe it is like this. Not a lot of people played multiplayer games of any genre about 15 years ago. That's why esports was very, very small. The amount of people who played like Counter-Strike even was very small compared to the amount of people who played PC games. And the whole point is that's because even other men didn't realize that gaming's fun. Even they thought gaming is a thing for nerds and a very specific type of man. And even if they were a man, they thought, well, I'm not that type of man. I'm a jock, or I'm someone who likes, for example, I don't know, actually there's people who were nerds even who didn't like games because they thought it was like too lowbrow. They thought, I like, chess or, I don't know, Dungeons and Dragons or something else that they thought was more intellectually stimulating than just shooting people with a gun, in a game. So I actually do think that clearly has something to do with how many people play. But obviously that is different from whether you can get as good. Like one area that I'm not necessarily convinced by is the notion that you need say 10 years of playing games to be able to start in something like Counter-Strike, for example, because I do know that the part of the reason why you can get kids who are fucking amazing at games is because people actually, if they have the right mindset, pick things up really quickly. I think a lot of what stops people picking stuff up is that they already tell themselves, for example, I'm sure some girls come in and have this. They think, oh, well, but games are for girls, for boys rather, girls don't really play them. And, oh, maybe I'll always be at a disadvantage because I didn't start so early. So they're already limiting themselves in their mind to think, oh, I can't be as good, or I can't be good at the game itself. Because, in general, if you look, you do get... there was actually a couple of examples of Korean StarCraft Brood War players who never used a computer until they were 15 and they discovered StarCraft. But then they practiced like all the others did, 14 hours a day and playing the best player. And, by 2 or 3 years, you would have never been able to guess this guy didn't grow up playing every game under the sun. So I agree, culturally it could have an impact. But I'm not sure that it's a prerequisite. I'd say it's more just a head start. Does anyone disagree?
Yeah, it's certainly helpful to have all that experience, because if you see the current professionals that are playing CSGO right now, a lot of them have been playing since 1.6 or before.
Sure, yeah.
But that doesn't mean that they're automatically the best players, because you see other players coming in, in the American scene, like Skadoodle, who I think, his first CS was CSGO, and he played professional maybe in some other game.
I think it was America's Army he was in before.
Or America's,
something like that, yeah.
So yeah, he didn't initially play CSGO to begin. So while it does give them a head start, it's not, the final say as to whether this person is going to be successful or not, because they just need to put in the same time and apply themselves in the same way that every other professional had.
Yeah,
I
do think that there's probably a hard cap, because, the older you get, the more difficult it is for you to pick things up. I don't think there's any, let's say 20, 25-year-old people who haven't played a game before who are going to suddenly emerge as a top-tier pro. Just because neurologically, I think they do have that disadvantage. But yeah, 15, 16, 17, I definitely think there's that that ability to pick it up.
Okay. So, okay, here's the way I want to tie this in now, because we've set the baseline of whether people think there is a difference and all that sort of thing, which I do think is something people should define whenever they talk about this issue, because you need to know what camp they're coming from. If they think there is some sort of like biological difference, then it's not as simple as saying just put this person on a male team, for example. So, okay, here's how I would start into the esports side of it. So, Miss Harvey, when you were starting to play, again, obviously a long time ago compared to now, when you were starting to play and trying to go to the pro level or be good at the game, was there discrimination that directly kept you out of being in good teams or teams that you think were at your level from men?
Okay, so I guess there's different steps in my career. There was the steps before I even started playing pro or playing competitively, and there was, because I was a mascot, because I was the only female player in like all of my local area, and I wasn't good at the game. And to start competing, I was like the 6th on every event. I was too ashamed or scared to play with guys and get judged and etc. because people kept telling me I was a mascot, etc. And it was only because I was picked up by a female team that I felt comfortable starting to compete and not being judged. So that's how I started. So I guess, yes, like 14 years ago. Then there was a lot of the times throughout my career where I played with men, where my team died, or like, because CLG Red, I've been on that team for 11 years, but back then we would win ESWCs, play for 2 months, and then like everybody would quit, but I was still competing. I was never ever quitting, and I would play with the guys for the rest of the year, like. And then eventually, even the World Cup died in 2009, so I played fully on a male team for a couple of years. And it was really difficult because I'm on a male team, and if I'm sucking, to be fair, it was never because I didn't practice enough, or because I didn't do enough deathmatch, or because I didn't watch the right demos, or because X and Y. It was always, well, we should probably replace the female player on the team. And it was really hard for my teammates, though, which I trusted, some of them, to keep me on male teams. It was like, well, we're going to lose this good player because he doesn't want to play with a female. And I was like on decent male teams, not like obviously top 10 in an A, but like pretty good ones. And like that's my personal experience. It was always issues that were brought up not because of my actual skills, but because I'm a female, and that was, not gonna lie, really hard to always say, you know what, fuck them, I'll work harder, sorry for that word, I'll work harder, I'll prove them wrong, you know. So yeah, I mean, most of the time that's what I did, but it's still, you know, it's still a freaking drag, like, to have to go through that bullshit, to be fair. It doesn't mean I wouldn't do it again. I would obviously do it again, but it's never been a fair play field regarding attitude towards me as a player.
So has there been any period since you became a female world champion, for example, where you've wanted to join a male team, or you had like the in to join a male team and you faced discrimination at this level?
Well, so I played Invite a couple of seasons ago in ESEA, and I spent months trying out for teams, and I remember Rush. Actually, you mentioned Rush earlier. He was picked up on a team I was supposed to join instead of me at some point. But like, to be fair, I don't know. I don't know. Will I ever know? Like, you know, I tried out for so long until this guy was like Amir or whatever, who was like, I'll give you a chance on my team. And then I played for him during the season, and I wasn't even the worst on the team. We didn't do that great, but you know, what I'm saying is I'll never know if it actually had an impact on me getting picked up by good guys or not, I guess.
Okay, masq, what was your experience like as in going into the competitive side? Like, I mean, obviously you did play with some male teams. In fact, as far as I know, did you ever play on a female team?
I've tried out for female teams. For whatever reason, I never went through with it. So most of my experience has been on predominantly male teams. Now, in my experience, I tried out for teams. Yeah, I didn't make some teams, but I was able to join other teams in the meantime, and then finally earn my way up to, you know, to make a team that I wanted to be on. But during that time, I realized that more times than not, teams will choose reliability and relevant experience over whether like a player with great potential or who everybody thinks has great potential can be molded or not as the first major criteria of picking up a player. I was a new player in CSGO. I did not have the league history that would say, hey, this person is for sure going to do decent or well in this tier. So for me, my thought was I had to go straight to getting experience and starting from the bottom and slowly climbing up until my league history would say without a doubt I should be next, at least to be given a chance in this tier in question.
Yeah.
So I mean, like, that's why you see a lot of the same players getting shuffled around from team to team, even if they're like washed up as hell. So like when it comes to like higher levels of play, I think that you have to ensure that, I mean, you can't just be winning female tournaments and saying, well, I'm winning these female tournaments, so a professional team, male professional team, or at least like a semi-professional team should give me a shot, because that's just out of the question, because you're not winning against the people that they're competing against. You have to have some sort of standard that says, you know, well, if you beat these teams and you compete in this tier, for sure you can get that shot. But if you're not within that open circuit, ensuring that you get that league history, then nobody's going to take you seriously whatsoever.
Okay. So, Stephanie, missharvey, on this topic, right, when we're talking about if there's like discrimination or something blocking women getting into the male side of the game, the assumption that we're making to make the argument legitimate is that the woman in question is good enough at the game that, you know, their skill means they should be allowed to get into the team, or they'd be a good enough teammate, or they could follow the tactic, you know, whatever the basics of being a pro are. And the only thing that's keeping them out is gender, right? The people there are looking and seeing like, oh, yeah, like you're saying, oh, well, we need to kick someone, just kick the woman, like I don't want her on the team, for whatever reason, you know. We won't speculate what the reasons are, but these reasons exist in this premise. So is this the reason why, in your opinion, there aren't more women who are, at the moment, some of the best in the female scene, not playing for female teams and just 100% only trying to play in male teams?
Wait, so you say, is this the reason why there's females that will not play in female teams?
I mean, if we were trying to find if the best women in Counter-Strike could play in male teams, ideally we'd want the most skilled women at the moment in the female scene to try to just play in what we'd call mixed teams, but really just male teams, right? Ideally, we'd want them to just do that because that would be the best chance of them making it, in theory. Do you think discrimination is what stops them doing that?
Probably not. Like, for me at this point, a couple years ago when we decided to form CLG again, whenever CSGO was picked up and stuff, and I had the choice, do I stay on a male team and join a female team again? It wasn't because of discrimination, because at that point I didn't care. Like, it was art, but I still wanted to compete, so I didn't care that it was art or whatever. The only reason why I went back to playing on that team is, well, one of the reason is they're actually my friends. I actually really enjoy playing with these girls. And at this point, it's not about being on a female team anymore for me. It's about, hey, these are my teammates. And if it wasn't for them, I would have stayed on male's team after we died. And that's it. I would have never joined back the female circuit. Okay. And the reason why I'm on this team is because I really enjoy competing with them. I enjoy going to like small events and trying to succeed with these girls. And yeah, it's become like a bigger purpose now, like a message about, hey, female can do this, la la, whatever. And yeah, and everything that you exposed in your video as well. Yeah, I have the opportunity to compete in the international tournaments a couple of times a year, and I take it. But regardless, I would be on a male team today if it wasn't for these women that I'm living with in my house right now.
Okay.
It's as simple as that.
masq, what do you think? Do you think that the reason why, I mean, it's great that the BBC article featured Giuliano, because most people would say of the women who play at the moment, she's one of the best. I mean, in terms of skill, she seems to be one of the most skilled. Do you think that it is discrimination that stops someone like that just saying, I'm just a player and I'm just going to try and get onto the best team I can, not just play in a female team or in a female tournament?
I don't think it's discrimination at all. It's just simply that there's either a lack of interest or they're not that serious about competing at a higher level, because if you want to compete at a higher level, you have to put aside all friendships and try as an individual to reach that level. Because while it's noble to, try to get together 5 females and eventually and hopefully make the statement that, hey, girls can do it too, no questions asked, because you don't have any males on the team that'll say, oh, she just got carried by that male player. You're just shooting yourself in the foot as a competitive player if that's your goal, because it is in no way in the least bit practical for primarily 2 main reasons. It's like, one, you're limiting your teammates, who your teammates can be based on gender as that first prerequisite. And that gender happens to have a severely smaller talent pool, as if it wasn't already hard enough trying to put together a team of 5 like-minded and like-skilled individuals. I mean, ask anybody, even in like main or IM, and they're going to say, trying to find that solid 5 that you can depend on, even when you have the entire competitive population to choose from within that level, it's extremely hard to do. And most teams end up dying beyond the first season because they have no success whatsoever. So trying to have that stability while limiting your talent pool is just shooting yourself in the foot. And then 2, because of the lack of talent, often you have to wait months before finding a half-decent 4th and 5th. And if you cannot, you'll resort to having to train a player usually up to your level. And it's not about, training up that person to familiarize themselves with the team and how your team works. It's more like this person is 2 or 3 tiers below you, and you're trying to train them up because they're a female and you need them on your team to join these female, tournaments. And that's the setback that most upper-tiered male teams don't have to make whatsoever, because, they usually choose somebody within their tier or maybe someone at the top of the tier next in question. So, yeah.
Okay, right, Requine, I haven't forgotten about you. I'm going to start the next topic with you, but I just want to, while I've got the 2 of them talking on this topic, I want to ask this then. So, missharvey, one point I made in my video, which I would really love if you have a counter for or a reason as to why this doesn't happen, is I tried to have a thought experiment of, is there a way we could currently, with the current pool of people who are playing League of Legends, CSGO games where, people want to see female pros in theory, is there a thought experiment of what already exists that could show that they're good enough without them already being on the team? And if you remember, the example I came up with was like in League of Legends especially, there is no voice comms anyway. So if the guy was called Bill Harvey and he really was good at solo queue, he could be, top ranked in League of Legends. And yeah, that won't necessarily get you on a pro team, but it could kind of show on some base level, like, I'm at least skill-wise as good as some of these players. In CSGO, the obvious example I gave was FPL, Face It Pro League, where these are, like, in theory, some of the best people who play, like, PUGs, mixed games playing. And again, in theory, if you're good enough, now it's true, there is voice comms in CSGO. In theory, if you're good enough, you should be able to get into this division, right? Because like I said, even though in theory men could vote you out because they could hear your voice and know you're a woman, I actually think in that scenario, that would be the ultimate way to blow the lid off discrimination. If you came out and if Giuliano was really good enough to be in FPL, and she came out and said, you know what, I'm good enough, and some men even said I should go for it, and then these people have all voted against me, I think that would be like a massive shitstorm. I don't know if the players would get away with that. So what is your take on this? Why do you think then we aren't seeing women like showing outside of the team aspect, like that they're top players in this way? Is there something preventing that?
I don't think so. And I do believe, like in ESEA, which we don't play FPL in America, so I don't actually know how this system works.
Okay.
But in ESEA, there's some sort of like ranking system based on the pugs and mixes that you do, and you actually have a couple of women that are really high, I-rated, and I don't believe that when I play I'm discriminated because of my gender, because everybody knows me in the community within ESEA, so I don't think it matters. They just know I'm a player or whatever. So I think it's somewhat there. I just don't think that these ladders kind of mean anything, even for the guys. Actually, well, for ESEA, I guess. Like, even for the guys, if you're a pug star, like, as long as you don't have any, like, you need some sort of team-based accomplishment to kind of be respected.
Exactly. Yeah, well, it's kind of what masq was saying, right? You need, like, the league experience to show that you're legit.
So I mean, it might be different in league, because I've heard like the top ranked players usually get picked up for teams because they're so like mechanically amazing.
Okay.
But in CS, it, like, yeah, you have a good awesome thing, people still don't really care.
Okay.
I think so. I don't know. It's hard for me to say what would be the best way for a female to like burst out in CS:GO at least.
Yeah.
But like in League, for example, I hope and wish that it could happen.
Okay. Right, Masq, what do you think on this topic? Is there do you have a counter as to why there are there women that are essentially good enough to do this, and for whatever reason, assuming they're not in rank S like missharvey's talking about, they just don't do it on like an individual level? Because I'm kind of trying to find the example essentially of where if you were, like for example, when segregation existed in race, if you were some Jackie Robinson type guy, the idea is you're so good, eventually they have to take notice of you, even if they don't let you on top teams or whatever, you know?
Yeah, and that was when it was institutionalized. So I wouldn't bring in that. I mean, you could say the same thing, but I would say that in terms of like the amateur scene, because like for one, like we all start off as amateurs, right?
Sure.
The more females coming into the game are coming in the game when people have already established themselves as professionals.
Okay.
So coming in as amateurs, the amateur scene is not really that well developed in that there aren't as many local LANs that I would like to see, because, you know, trying to climb up into main and premier and invite, there's a ton of teams that don't have this chance to get LAN experience or team-based experience, like Steph was saying. And because of that, there's no way for them to really showcase their skills in a setting that truly matters. Because, I mean, they could show it online, they can show it in pugs, but do teams really look at your pug stats? It's like, yeah, that may get you in the front door, but that doesn't mean that they're going to solely base whether they pick you up off of your pug experience or, you know, your online experience. There needs to be some sort of LAN experience in place, and right now there aren't that many, you know, low tier LANs that these teams can go to compete, to see, you know, to figure out who are the best players within the scene. And most of the LANs are primarily focused on, you know, professional players with large major tournaments. So I would like to see, you know, more of these local LANs and amateur LANs emerging, so that all of these players who potentially could have a shot at being professional have the resources to do so.
Okay. Right, because here's one of the things that I don't really understand when it's presented as like discrimination, is I can totally understand how in a scenario where, let's say, there was a man and a woman who were equally good, and the team had a choice to pick between them. I mean, this is very rarely going to exist as some like laboratory experiment like I'm presenting it here, like two perfectly skilled people, and then you choose between one or the other. But if we imagine that scenario did exist for the sake of the concept, right? If this existed, I could understand why men might just think, even if it's just ignorance, well, since they're equally skilled, I'd rather play with the man than the woman, because I don't really play with women. I don't really know what that'd be like. And then maybe they have some naive idea, like she's just going to cry if we lose, or something silly like that, right? I could understand in that scenario how there could be a level of discrimination. But the part that doesn't quite make sense from some of the women who are like female pros who are arguing that they're discriminated against is that only works to me when it's on the top level. Like, I actually think if there was a woman, okay, so we use the example here of someone who was just a pog star, and that's how they're going to get known. Say there was a female Stewie2K, and for anyone who doesn't know from another game, Stewie2K is someone who, just from pogs alone, like he only played in like the division below invite, just from pogs alone, he became like notorious for being like really skilled, but in like just purely a skill manner, you know, he had no real league experience, and the idea was, whether or not he actually would have gotten into a top team, I think someone would have taken a chance on him eventually, because just like the hype meant that people wanted to see him, some people wanted to see him fail, you know. That was a way that people wanted to know what would happen to him, you know. And so I actually think if there was a female Stewie2K, okay, Cloud9 wouldn't pick them up. That's a bit ridiculous, right? But I'll tell you what, there would definitely be an invite level team, in my opinion, would pick them up, even if just for the hype. Like, let's just see what this... Like, for example, I'll give you a good example, okay? When Fraud came back to CSGO, Fraud was never a good player in CSGO. Right? He was an amazing player in 1.6, but he lived off his alias in CSGO. Everyone remembered what an amazing player he used to be. So when he joined with Complexity, who at the time wasn't a very good team, but it was his old organization, I think part of the reason they picked him up was, hoping he'd become good, all that. But part of it was like, at least we're going to get kind of, you know, the buzz of having Fraud initially. Like, people are going to at least watch us and see, you know, is he any good still? I think in that sense, some lower level team, a Splice, Complexity, whatever, if there was a good enough female, it would actually be worth more to them to take a chance on that person than actually Stewie2K in this example, because Stewie2K would just bring the hype of being the pog player. He wouldn't even have the extra, oh my god, it's a girl playing on a man's team, and will he be good enough? I think that would actually make it financially, or in terms of marketing, worth someone taking a chance. Do you think I'm wrong, Miss Harvey?
No, I think you're right. I don't think that discrimination is that big of a problem in the pro scene. I just don't. I just think that there isn't any good female players, or very, very few. I think the problem is harassment. I think it's a little different.
Okay.
I don't think that, like I said, as a competitor, I would have worked my way up, like Bree was saying. I think it's respectable and important. I don't think that discrimination in the end would have stopped me. And yeah, it might have made a difference, but in the end, one team would have given me a shot, and that's all I would have needed to make it happen. So I agree with you.
But in the BBC piece, though, I mean, obviously you're not Giuliano, so I'm not asking you to speak for her, but maybe you know what she meant by this. Giuliano said a line in the BBC piece where she said, like, women, we aren't thought of as in the top of the world. And she meant as in, like, we're not thought of as the best players. We're the best female players, but no one thinks we are just among the best CS players. So now, whether or not what she meant by the context of that, I can't know. But it sounded, in the context of the BBC put it, like she was implying she thinks some of the women are as good as some of the men, and that in this sense that there is discrimination.
I mean, that piece, that parenthesis, I've never expressed anything that I feel about it. Like, they followed us for like a week and made us really look like victims, which I don't appreciate. But so I don't know what she meant. I don't know what the context was. I barely presented it as being a victim once when I talked to them. Yeah. And that's how the piece came out. So it's very, very hard to say. But what I do believe is like if that was the case, then they would actually be in the top 20 teams in Europe,
Okay, let me put it this way, just to get a baseline of what you think of this. Do you think there is a woman out there who is as skilled as like a Stuart UK? Like, for example, for people who don't know, Stuart UK also was not in the pro scene until this year. So in theory, if you went and found Stuart UK in November of last year, he had the skill to be in a team. He just didn't have his chance yet. Okay, do you think there is a woman like that out there, or maybe on a female pro team, maybe not, and she just hasn't had her chance? Do you think that's the case? I mean, you've played all the top female pros in theory, right?
I don't think so. I still think Stuart UK is like really, really specific example. If there was like tons and tons of Stuart UK, then maybe I'll be like, yeah, but like he's one of a kind. And like maybe 2 years ago, I remember telling him like, you're freaking good. And I remember telling my guy teams friends like, hey, pick him up. Like, he's ready. He's gonna be the next big thing. Even way before he joined tonight, and everybody knew it. So like, it's really hard for me to compare it to the female scene. I don't think so. One of my teammates is actually really talented, and she's a woman, and she picked up the games like 2 years ago. And I'm wondering if she could be it in a couple of months/years with all the experience that she's going to gain on our team, I think. Maybe her. Like, she's actually pretty decent. Like, I'm impressed when I watch her play. So maybe Claudia. But even then, like... Well, like Bree was saying earlier, like, are we limiting her by having her on our team, and she could like blossom within like amazingly good players, like I don't know.
Your team could probably be like her starting point, but I wouldn't say you're holding her back necessarily. But I mean, you could say that player X from one of the top female teams could potentially compete in tier 1 or 2, but this holds no weight until they actually try to do that. So. That person will be never taken seriously, or at least never be put into the question of, hey, this person has potential, until they try to uncover that potential on teams that are, trying to get to the top, or, somewhere around that person's skill level, or helping that person grow to reach that skill level.
Okay.
Do you mind if I actually jump in and say something?
Yeah, come on.
So, about the hypothetical, like, what if this anonymous player gets to the top of the ranks, and then they pull off their mask and they're like, surprise, I was a woman all along. I think kind of the problem with that hypothetical is, and I'm not super familiar with CSGO, this is more from a league perspective, that seems a little joyless, like grinding, having this anonymous identity, no voice chat with anyone, don't talk to anyone, and obviously there is that payoff at the end of the road, right? The hypothetical, they go, wow, this woman's really worth it. We should totally invest in her.
Sure.
But like, I I can see that being hugely demoralizing, going like, yeah, if I succumb and don't identify myself in any way and play like a machine for however many weeks, maybe then people will take me seriously. Like, that's a bit of a grim interpretation, but maybe just if there's a woman capable of that, she doesn't see the reward as worth it for that process.
Okay. That could be the case, but I mean, the point there is that's to prove whether the women are actually good enough. Like,
yeah,
if people claim it's
saying,
just discrimination, then they never actually have to prove. Like, the problem with discrimination, as you will see in all aspects of modern society, is that when there is real discrimination, that is really important that you call it out. But as soon as people start pulling whatever card they have in their back pocket on every issue, it means you have no progress. So, for example, there are people out there who, anytime anything happens at their work, they say, "Oh, this person's racist," and as a result, they might themselves never address any issues they have in their own work, or they might not actually realize that they aren't helping out in a certain manner, or they're not good enough. If they pull that card themselves, they can limit themselves that way, That's kind of the point of the thought experiment I was trying to make.
That's a fair point. I just felt like answering the hypothetical with a hypothetical was...
No, I mean, listen, I also would not think that's fun. Like, I wouldn't do that personally if I was a girl, but that's why I gave the analogy to, like, the racism example in sports, because the idea there is if someone really is good enough and they want to be, like, the person who breaks the ground and proves it, then, yeah, they're going to have to go against the grain. It's not going to be fun. Like, I'm sure it wasn't fun to be the only black player on a team full of white players in, like, the 1940s or whatever. I don't know baseball, so I don't know when that was, but some period along that time. So, okay, let me shift it a little bit. So one of the problems is, if I tried to put myself in the position where I was a woman of the equivalent skill level to the people who are the female pros, and I am in that scenario a woman in this thought exercise, I personally wouldn't do the scenario that we just played out there, Requine. I wouldn't try and be like some amazing, like, movie character who, like, hides their identity for ages just to succeed and do this. I personally, if I was that good, would play in female tournaments. I'd try and be a star there. I'd try and win some money. I'd enjoy myself. I'd play with my friends, like missharvey says, and I'd probably just stream and try and make money the easy way. Like, I actually think there's a lot of pro players that I admire just because for some reason they're so driven as males to actually just compete, whereas some of them I know in League of Legends especially could just stream and make probably as much money, but without the stress of, people telling you shit if you lose the game. So in this particular scenario, unfortunately, my own perspective is that I think a lot of the female pros do kind of use it as like, well, if I have the choice between being in the 90th best CS team or being in the 3rd best women's team, and that comes with money and fame and cool tournaments and get to play with people I like, they're going to choose that one. What do you think, masq?
Yeah, there's definitely no glory in trying to be the only female on a male team because, for one, you have a high probability of failure, at least more so than, you would competing in a female tournament because, obviously, the female tournaments and leagues have a lower caliber of players. But even if you're somehow above that caliber, you're not going to get the fame and glory and the attention and the recognition you would by playing on an all male or, a predominantly male team. And you have to, go in with that mentality that you don't care about that. And that's where a lot of females get caught up in saying, well, you like what you said, like I could either become a professional female and, get all these wonderful perks, or I can grind my way out to the top without, knowing whether or not I'm actually going to make it or not, and maybe getting no return in my investment because it's a very risky investment. So for the risk to reward factor, it's definitely more appealing to obviously go to the female tournaments than it is for just trying to grind it out the old natural, the way that a bunch of other males have done before.
By the way, for any of these topics, people can jump in if they have a point. Like, you don't have to wait for me to call on you or anything. So, missharvey, if you yourself said you want to play with your friends and you would be on a male team right now, isn't it a little bit tricky to go out there and tell people, like, it's women aren't respected and it's hard for them to get to the top of the scene and, there's not as much money in the female tournaments? Isn't that tricky when you and everyone doesn't want to compete in male tournaments?
Well, I'm not sure I understand the question because we do compete in male tournaments.
Okay, but so they're not trying to be on male teams and they're not trying to go that route, right?
Yeah, but I also don't.
I mean, by the way, I agree with you. I think it would probably be less fun to play with a bunch of men, even in as much as if, let's say they're all fine with it, none of them discriminate in any sense. maybe you don't know them as well. You don't have that social aspect, etc. So in that scenario, I can understand why people wouldn't do that. But how come, as far as I can tell, none of the top females do that? Because, let me just put this way, because it makes it look like it's because they've all taken the easier route or the more comfortable route, which is to play female tournaments.
Well, that's how we all started to compete. Like, if you check any of my teammates, we all started to compete in female teams. And every single one of us, if we were not on that team, we would play with males. Like, I've asked this question to all of them.
Yeah.
So it's really hard. I guess we just grew within this team and we love each other so much that we continued. But I can't speak for the other female teams why why Juliana is on that team. I just know that, like, I started this project, with the girls, this project in my life journey, and I kind of don't want to give it up. And like Bree said, it's a higher risk and maybe a potentially higher reward to play on a male team and try to make it there. But I guess that's not my purpose in life anymore because I'm 30 and I don't want to do that grind anymore. I don't know. Like, it's really hard to answer that question.
Okay, because here's the thing. I mean, I made this point in my video, and it's something that actually I've made the point to many people over the years, which is that one discussion that doesn't need to happen is, should there be female tournaments? Because as I explained in my video, there is almost no crossover between the budget for the female tournament and the male tournament. Therefore, all you're basically saying there is, should there be less tournaments? Because you're just taking away a tournament that would exist. They're not going to take that prize money and put it on to the male tournament. So as a result, it's not harming anyone that it exists in terms of like male Counter-Strike, But assuming we allow them to exist, the only issue I have is you have to acknowledge, surely most female pros acknowledge that it's essentially marketing that allows their tournaments to exist, right?
No, that's not true, actually. If you check out anything that Intel does, they don't do any marketing with the female teams they sponsor. It's purely their diversity program to push gaming within minorities. It has nothing to do with marketing. Actually, like, we have a really interesting sponsorship with them because without saying too much details, we don't have to do any promotion. It's literally just us supporting them supporting us to be able to compete. So, and they have this Intel Katowice tournament as well. They don't have any return in marketing from it. So I don't know. I mean, surely you do
advertise their name and logo on your shirts and whatnot. So that is marketing in a way.
I know, but it's like I said, it's a different kind of marketing opportunity. And I do agree with what you said, though, by the way, that a lot of them is about marketing, but it's not all of them.
Okay.
So
we're not
only marketing.
I think it might be fair to say that there are different types of marketing. Like, I think if when someone goes, oh, well, this female team was made for marketing, it's seen as very loaded because there was the Sirens in League of Legends, and there's been all these really unfortunate female teams that were marketing tools, and it's almost an insult to be compared to them. But I think it's fair to say that if Intel is using your team for diversity gaming to get new people into gaming, that seems like marketing.
Yeah, I guess so. I guess that's how you see marketing, like promotion within a specific demographic, which, I guess it's marketing.
Yeah.
Well,
marketing isn't necessarily a bad thing because, the only reason these professional teams, even the male ones, are able to, compete and that are funded is through marketing. These companies, these tech companies are pushing their products onto these, professional gamers to, advertise, like, Cloud9, I think, has like Logitech, so they're forced to use their gear and whatnot. All in all, what it comes down to is marketing, and it's not necessarily a bad thing to say, oh yeah, we're just here for a marketing purpose, but just understanding why you're there in the first place kind of, prevents you from kind of getting distracted and, thinking that, it's something more than just marketing.
Yeah, I just wanted to clarify that. I don't think saying that a team is made for marketing or is used for marketing is an insult. I think it just comes across like that because it's been done so badly in the past.
Fair point. I might have taken it as a bad thing, and I think you both are right. It's not a bad thing at all.
Okay, here's the thing. as masq said, by the way, there's obviously marketing is a huge part of male esports as well. And for example, a team like Cloud9 probably gets more salary than a certain European team that might be better than them, but comes from a region where they haven't been able to market to the same sponsors and they don't have the same demographics they're hitting. So in that scenario, someone could say Cloud9 is a marketing team in that sense. I mean, I'll give you a great example from history, is actually last year when that first Kingwin team was created, the one that was like Scream and Makalele and a few others. Because what people forget is before some better team players joined them, like they got Dennis later on, and then eventually they became G2 and FaZe. This team initially was almost entirely set up as a marketing ploy because it was like kind of what you call like a freak show match in combat sports, right? Is where you get like a really tall person and you have them fight a really small person. And people are only watching because of how crazy the setup is, right? So the point of this team initially was we're going to get all these people you sort of know who have big names, but they're all from different countries, which never happened before in CSGO. And we're going to have them all compete on a team and go to the real tournaments with all the best teams. And initially, by the way, this team actually failed the first few tournaments because, yeah, they weren't that good a team. But the marketing worked, you know, like they got a lot more exposure for coming last at DreamHack Summer than any team that came last that wasn't a good team, put it that way, you know. So in this sense, marketing is obviously all prevalent. But my point here is, essentially, the tournaments exist like that. And as you said, missharvey, once the tournament is over, a lot of the female teams aren't grinding every day. They aren't trying to play every small tournament they can find. They aren't trying to, in theory, qualify for every big tournament out there like the other male tournaments. Like, it's not like they play all the female tournaments and then they just are denied access to the male ones. So is that still a problem in the female scene? Do women not just try to play every tournament?
Well, from the experience that I have in North America with Selfless and us, no, it's not the case anymore. I don't even think you can win female tournaments by not competing all year long. I think the circuit is much stronger than it was a couple of years ago, where you could just lay back and not do anything. We compete in the SCA with the guys. We attend every single tournament that we can attend in America, which are open to anyone to either qualify or like we've tried to qualify for the major, which I know sounds completely ridiculous because we didn't really make it to the minor qualification, but we still compete in everything we can, even if they're pointless tournaments, or even if we know that probably we won't make it. We just try to get the experience that we can everywhere. We won't have another female tournament for 3-4 months now. I think the next one, if Katowice still happens, will be in March. And we had 1 week break. We're starting practice Wednesday, Tuesday, like in a couple days. So I disagree with that statement now. But I do believe that maybe some female teams don't do that. Maybe in Europe, because there's way more teams than we do. Like I said, we only have like 2 or 3 female teams in North America. So it's like the pool is completely inexistent. So, but I know these women work really hard as well.
Okay. So one aspect of female tournaments existing, and this is something you always mention, actually, missharvey, is that it will increase exposure of esports to women because they will see other women playing and maybe that will make them play, or maybe they'll just want to watch more. So in this scenario, do you actually think that the existence of female tournaments is in any way paving the way to there being female pros who play in the male scene?
Very good question. I don't know. I do believe that it can inspire women to compete. But my hope is that it doesn't only inspire women to compete with the females. My hope is that it also inspires women to compete with the males and even like piss females off. Like I want a female to be pissed off about these female tournaments and compete versus the guys and show everyone that she can do it. Like my hope is just to bring attention. It's just raising awareness about female gaming, right? And eventually these female tournaments I think should be gone. But in this specific situation in esports in 2016, I do believe they're still valuable. But hopefully it will inspire women to compete with guys. And I know that's how I started like being extremely serious about gaming, is when I saw these female tournaments and I was like, dude, I want to win this. I want to be the best female player in the world, right? And that's when I was like, all right, I'm not only competing, this is my goal. I'll do everything I can to achieve it, right?
Okay.
So hopefully it inspires other people.
Right, what do you think, Requine?
What do I think about whether female tournaments
Yeah.
inspire women to compete? Yeah,
Do they
absolutely.
make
I
women
think
want to
so.
compete? Do they make them want to watch? Does it increase? Is it a stepping stone to getting to where there is actual pros who are women who it's not just from female tournaments?
The one reason that I'm not sure is because when, in League, I don't watch CSGO as much. I watch League and I watch, the LCS. I watch Overwatch League as well. And while there are a couple of female players, there was Romelia on Renegades.
Yeah.
And then there's a female Overwatch player, and she was on Team France, I believe, in the World Cup. And I enjoy seeing female players. I enjoy seeing people who I can sort of relate to on that immediate level, but I'm not sure if it would be something that brings in new players immediately, because I think people want to see good gameplay. I think they want to see high level tournaments that are well produced and easy to watch and fun to watch. And I think that matters more for drawing people in than the gender of the participants. I haven't seen many specifically female tournaments, so it's hard for me to comment. With the sports that I watch don't necessarily have them as much or as visibly, so it's hard for me to say.
Okay. What is your thought on this, masq?
I do think that they are a stepping stone, and it does get females' foot in the door to play competitive games, because, it's putting female gaming on a pedestal, and it's like saying, like Harvey said, like, hey, I want to get into this, I want to compete, I want to be in their place. But in the 13 years that female tournaments have existed, it hasn't translated to anything beyond just female tournaments. So ideally, and I've thought about this, it's like what I would like to see personally is that now that we've established that female tournaments are going to, stay, and, there's nothing wrong with having these female tournaments, just as long as it translates to something, more than that, is that females would be dispersed throughout the open circuit, joining teams as either the only female or with another female, but it takes the females themselves to do this and to try to move up the ladder on their own individual pace, which would obviously produce better results faster, because, they're playing against players of higher calibers, and they're putting themselves at risk, and they're challenging themselves more than they would in a female tournament. And then when a female tournament would kick around, they might as well, band together to participate in these tournaments for fun as like a pug team, and to market it in the same way that has always been done. So you're not losing the marketing aspect. You're not, foregoing female tournaments and, just completely saying, hey, we don't need any female tournaments. Like, you can still have them, but and since it's been established that they're not going anywhere, and there's no requirement that says you have to be in an all-female team outside of the female tournament before you can participate in these tournaments, why not do this? Why haven't we seen this shift already? Like, are these female tournaments more important to these female players that they forego this option, which would, ultimately make them a better player, because they may not be as likely to win as a pug team than with an actual team? I mean...
Okay. You bring a really good point that I've actually said a lot. I do believe that these female tournaments are just band-aids, and that the problem is somewhere else, and that it's like way deeper, and they will not fix anything. That's my opinion. I agree with what you said about the 13 years.
Okay.
They're just like some sort of temporary support that doesn't affect the community as much as I wish it was affected. And I don't have the solutions on how to have more female competitors in esports, but I do believe that only female tournaments is not going to fix anything, and that we need like a better support system and better barriers of entry, etc., for women, for anyone actually, just amateur gamers, which is extremely weak.
So I tried to, one thing people don't often do is try and think of actual solutions to this, as in real things you should suggest, or a concept that could somehow work. So I've come up with a few, and I want to get your thoughts on what they would work as. So one is not my idea, but this is an idea I have heard other people put forward, which is sometimes, it's mainly female gamers who say this, they try to use the logic, which isn't entirely flawed, right? Which is that you can only really become a top player when you play with good teams as well. Because, I mean, a lot of players who aren't just like solo hard carry type players, they are a product of the team they're on, and a better team and a player equally good might look better because of the team system he plays in, okay? So in this scenario, some people argue that you have to give more women chances on mixed teams. Like there have to be like lower level men's teams that say, we're going to try this woman out and we're going to give her more of a chance. And if you do that, some of them then will like take hold of that opportunity and they can then turn that into something, or they'll advance as players, you know, by playing with the better players. Do you think this should be done, Miss Harvey? Is this something that would help?
I actually thought about doing a forced co-ed tournament with like one of my sponsor, which would be like 3 players plus 1 female or 2 female, you know, I don't know. And seeing if that would push women to compete amongst men, or if that would like inspire women to get better because they would play with pros or whatever. I think that it's a valid thing to explore. I don't know if it's gonna make that big of a difference in the end. I think it's just some sort of band-aid. Yeah, that's my opinion on it.
Okay. Anyone else want to jump in on that one?
Aren't teams already doing that? I mean, there are male teams already giving females who, you know, a shot at joining their team. I know plenty of females who have tried out for male teams, but whether they joined the team because they were good enough or not, like, the point is they were still given a chance to try out. So they're trying to take a chance on them, but whether or not, you know, they succeed is entirely up to the person, or whether that team is looking for that type of player or not.
Okay, I have one now. I have one now, Miss Harvey. You might like this, okay, because it's a really out there idea, but it's one that could be done, and it could be done like now. And if it worked, it would be the most epic movie script plot ever. Are you ready? So here's what you do, right? Everyone's thinking about this the wrong way around. You're all trying to get a woman to join a man's team and to go through the traditional male route. There's a different way around this, okay? So what you do is you get a man to join a woman's team and they try to compete in the male tournaments. And what you're going to do, right, is because there are women's teams that have proper salaries and proper funding that like low-level men's teams don't have, what we're going to do, right, is we need to pick a man who's really sick at the game, but he can't get in the top scene. So I already have the player in mind, right? We're either going to get Dazed, and he's going to be the in-game leader, and we're going to pay him a top salary, you know, like a really good, like, top female salary. So, you know, it's more than like a low-level man would get, and obviously he's banned, so we're not going to be playing in majors at this point, put it that way. We're going to be trying to just qualify for like a DreamHack summer, right? Or the other player I have in mind, if we don't want to go the in-game leader route, is we're going to get another banned player, that guy Foxio, who's French, because he was actually a very skilled player, and he just got banned too early in his career, so people didn't see he was a sick player. So either as an in-game leader or just as a sick, like, AWPer, this player, when he joins the female team, his benefit is he gets like a really weird fame because people would be following his career, like, what the fuck's going on here? And he gets the salary, but also he's so skilled, either as an in-game leader or a player, maybe he could even carry this team into, like, you know, at least into like a small tournament, like a tier 3 tournament. They could maybe they could qualify online, they could get in. What about this? Is this an idea? Could it work?
Yeah, I love this idea. We actually played with a guy almost all of 2016 with a guy on our team. I don't know if you know this. We couldn't find a female, and instead of picking up like Bree was saying, like a low tier female that we would have to bring up to our own level, we just decided to play with the guy. And for the whole year, we almost played with the guy on online leagues, online tournaments. We had different guys on our team that we recruited, and then they also in-game leaded for us at some point. You know, and it was fun.
Like, to take away the joking aspect of it, though, like, why isn't this actually an approach then? Because let's say, for example, like, I know Team Secret does try to play in male tournaments. They try to compete there. Why not try using some of the salary in the budget to get, like, one man in? You don't have to get a lot, you know, just get one to try it out or something, see if that can help you. And then let's say 3 of them are pretty good. Now you've got a decent team there, you know. Is there a reason, do you think, why this has never been tried or why no one would do it?
I actually never thought about it. I know that personally, I wanted like a really I talked to Adrian about what he wanted to do at some point, and because we had the money to maybe potentially look into something, and he wasn't interested. Never talked to Dace about it.
To be a player?
It was like at that point it was coach / player, because like I said, we didn't have a 5th.
Yeah.
So for a long time he would have been our 5th, but it didn't work out. He wasn't interested at all. But I mean, if at workout, maybe it would have been like a revelation. And the only time we would have had a fifth female on our team would be for female tournaments, so 3 times a year, because we have no female tournaments. That would have been I like this idea. Next time that someone retires that get cut on my team, I'm proposing it.
Or just get like another example is just get like Cadian, someone who's like he's like a decent player, but he can't get on top teams in his attention hall. Get that guy. That is a perfect example. He would love to be famous. In fact, he probably love the fact he's playing in a women's team. You think that's like some sick status or something, you know? Okay, masq, what were you going to say?
Crap, what was I going to say? Yeah, I think the idea, I mean, that could work because, I mean, theoretically, if you get a person who is skilled enough to, you know, coach people, like say, you know, they have the experience as a higher tier player like Jace, and they have the intelligence to, you know, be able to coach players up like, you know, he's done before. I mean, theoretically that could work as long as the females were willing and he was willing to do that. However, I'm not too sure where they would get the money for that because, I mean, all in all, it's a business. What you invest in is what you get out of. Like, what is a business going to get out of by investing so much money that this player could have made some other way?
Okay, here's what we do, masq, right? We're going to do a crowdfunding, and we're going to like send out the SOS message. All women in gaming, we need to prove finally that we are good enough. We just need proper coaching, you know. So we're going to pay Dazed 100K for 1 year of coaching, and he has to agree like 5 days a week, you know, like 6 hours a day. He has to study the demos. I'd
say more than 6 hours.
Whatever it would be, yeah. But.
This whole thing is reminding me of the Onion article, like, women's movement off to a great start, not that there's a man in charge.
Actually, really, you know, I think Daze and Steel are probably amazing coaches.
They're the two most qualified people, I think.
Yeah.
To do this, whether they're interested or not is another question, which I'm not too sure they're really willing to, because, you know, they probably have...
Listen, if you pay Steel 100K, I'm telling you, he's in. Days actually might need persuading. Steel's in. I'm telling you, 100K. I'll tell you from knowing him personally, he'd be in tomorrow.
I don't know if we have.
Go for it. Let's crowdfund it.
So okay, I have another idea, and this one's actually a lot more plausible, because obviously the problem in that scenario is you have to also convince the man to want to go and play in this female league, and unfortunately it's not as easy a sell as it sounds there. Like, it sounds cool to us because we don't have to do it, you know. So the other idea I had was actually, someone kind of touched on this before, the idea that you just have, I think it was you, missharvey, that you just have more amateur tournaments in general. So here's what my idea is, okay. You get a budget from someone like an Intel, etc., and you have a tournament, and it's going to be a LAN tournament, and the idea is, it's a bit like, you know, like in the minor system, you can't compete in the minor if you've already qualified for the major, or you've failed in the qualifier, right? And in that scenario, it prohibits people, so that in theory the minors only the people coming up from the bottom end of the major qualification system to then get into it, right? So it would be like this. It wouldn't be male or female. It would just be an amateur tournament, and the only rule would be, you know, you can't be a player who has played in a major or something like that, right? So it would take basically all the top pros out, but it wouldn't take out some of the people like Epsilon, for example, who are like pretty good men, but they're not at the pro level, the top pro level yet. And the idea here would be, all we do is, the only bias is, because we're getting this big investment from some company, we're going to invite a couple of female teams, you know. So they're automatically going to qualify. Then, you know, tier 3, tier 4 male teams will play at the tournament as well.
That's what Norton Arena did. The first one that still today, actually. So how Norton Arena works in Canada, they want to support female teams and Canadian teams, but as well as international teams. The first tournament, we were automatically invited amongst everybody else, which was like, it wasn't top tier teams that was there for the first one. It was like top tier 2. And then for the other tournaments, what they did was they have 1 or 2 slots for Canadian, full Canadian team, or 3 or plus Canadian teams and female teams. So we actually had to like do some sort of qualification. And we, for not the one that was in Montreal last week, but the one like 2 months ago, we were 1 win away from winning that qualifier and attending a tournament versus like Eric and CLG and whoever. 1 match away. So there's a tournament that already does that, and I freaking love it. And I think that's a good way for female to have some sort of exposure without like without like kind of shitting on them by trolling them versus top one teams with top tier teams, which obviously doesn't make sense in our whatever is going on right now. So I think that's a really interesting approach. I do believe that it's important to do these kind of things, but I also think that the amateur scene is really, really weak. It's really not supported, and I think it starts from there. And again, inviting these female teams would be like, I don't know, Selfless, Us, Secret, a bunch of other really awesome European teams, and then what? It supports the same female teams, right?
Okay.
And what I think sometimes is, like, I want to support lower tier females that are not. They don't necessarily want to compete within the females. They don't want to compete. They just want to compete with guys, but they don't have. Like, I don't explain it. Like, the amateur scene is so weak. It's like it's online and that's it. All the open lands are kind of dead. At least in North America compared to like years ago. So yeah, but I think that we should have more tournaments like this, like you mentioned.
Okay.
I think that would be really cool.
Yeah, it definitely isn't like as accessible as many would like it to be, because I remember competing, like I had to go to Southern California and attend the SoCal lands because there was really no lands going on in Texas that had a decent, show of players that, I could feel good about competing against. And like I had to travel all the way over there to attend those lands. But yeah, it definitely isn't accessible. It needs to be more accessible for amateur players. Like I've heard that, back in, whenever it was, LG lands in Dallas, like they were a regular occurrence. And there's nothing like that that's, going on right now that, people can depend on and rely on to compete in if they wanted to compete. Like the lands, like they'll occasionally pop up, like Philadelphia is one that's been consistent, but that's only for the East Coast area. What about, I haven't seen also any, SoCal lands or California lands happen too recently, but it's like, where are these, reliable lands that you can attend in these different regions of the country? And so far, there's none that have stepped up to the plate because maybe it isn't profitable, or it's just not, the interest is not there. Who knows?
Another thing too is I think like even when women players do really well in amateur tournaments, or you have like up and coming women players, I think content creators and people who are trying to like build hype and get people invested in players are really dropping the ball. Like every time like they'll be like, oh, this is a profile on a female player, and I'm like, great, I would love to learn more about this female player that I can become a fan of. And 9 out of 10 times the article is, this brave woman was harassed online, but then she decided she had enough and now she plays video games. And like that's it. They don't go into careers, they don't go into achievements, and you don't see any of these things highlighted, right? You don't see these tournaments, or like even if we did these tournaments and they were hugely successful, how much of the coverage of it would just be, oh, these brave women sure are playing some video games despite getting harassed, and not covering, their in-game accomplishments, their personalities, their teams.
Okay.
So it seems that most mainstream media has, resorted to the clickbait when it comes to like, things like they don't really understand, like esports, rather than trying to provoke a discussion or trying to truly understand the scene. It's just, let's leave it at what, I think I know about it, and then that's it. And hopefully that gains enough controversy or views to warrant my time spending writing that article.
Yeah, like the UFC, right, has fostered this incredible female scene. And one of the things they did is they sat down and they're like, this is how we're going to market it. We're going to market it very seriously. We're going to take all of the competitors seriously. We're not going to have, beauty versus the beast or anything demeaning. We're going to build interest in these players and give these players proper exposure, or these fighters proper exposure, and give them actual, things they can show off and be proud of. And I feel like a lot of the time you'll have these women-only tournaments or these amateur tournaments, and you're still not getting much proactive discussion or interest in them because the coverage just tends to be extremely lazy.
Okay. Because this is one area that I also think there's a disconnect, which is that you're right. So, for example, the two best examples of women's sports that are actually successful is women's UFC, because obviously, title fights on that, they get to be the co-main event, etc. If it's like a big fight. And also the other one is women's tennis, because actually women's tennis is fairly well watched as well, even by male viewers, etc. So this is one of the problems I have with the esports side, which is another way that women's esports would be going like much higher up is if the viewing figures were very high. And the problem I have with that is, like, at the beginning of the show, Miss Harvey, you said that, like, it's 50-50, the amount of women and men in gaming. And, like, I made this point in my video. Yeah, if you make gaming, like, everything, like a grandma on a Game Boy and someone on Facebook, yeah, that's gaming, right? But it doesn't seem like there's that many women in esports who specifically like to watch other women play esports. Am I wrong?
Yeah, I don't know. I usually compete in these women tournaments, so I don't even watch it myself. So I don't know if it's fun to watch.
Like when you're practicing for a tournament in particular, you're looking at, demos of the current professional players within the scene. I mean, yeah, for a female tournament, you may look at a demo or two of, that female team you may be up against, but in reality, it's like you don't watch female demos because they're not, worth the time to invest in, because there's other demos that would be a much better use of your time to watch, because these are the players that have made it to the top and have been successful doing so.
Okay, I've got a theory that might trigger you now, Miss Harvey. Are you ready? Because another reason why I think female tennis and female UFC fighting is popular. In terms of tennis, it's because it's not a team game, so it's just 1v1. So whoever is the best, like for example, Serena Williams, she wrecks the other women. It's nothing to do with gender. She just wrecks the person she's playing, right? And in a sense, it's kind of like the same as the male compete. I mean, she's not that she's good, but within her field, she's much better, right? And in UFC, obviously, it's very exciting. Even though they're women fighting each other, they still go all out. There is no difference in that sense. So here's the theory that might trigger you, Miss Harvey. I think a lot of the women who play in the female scene, especially I know this was the case back in the day, where it was only ESWC every year and then nothing, because it wasn't like a daily thing of playing and competition in that sense. Even some of the top teams were like, okay, these three players are really good, and then this is our friend, and then this is someone I just want to play with. It wasn't like the male teams where like, you can't just play with your friends in a top male team. You have to kick that guy if he's not good enough, and you have to get someone else because you've got to beat this team that's beating you, right? You've got to win the tournament. So this is my theory. Would women's Counter-Strike be more popular, as in it'd be more exciting and better product to watch if women just totally abandoned the idea of any friendship and they just made the most killer women's lineups ever and just tried to destroy the other teams?
Probably, but okay. So right now,
how do I make that happen?
There's only two markets, NA and Europe. So I believe that in Europe, the top team, which I would consider secret, is probably the ultimate European team. And as far as we were, I think that a couple years ago, you could have said that CLG was probably the ultimate female team in America as well. That's not the case anymore, because Selfless is like beating us back and forth, like we exchanging wins here and there. So like at that moment, maybe if we like destroyed both teams and made like one ultimate teams, maybe it would be possible. But then you would have to take the best NA and the best Euro and destroy that team and then make it happen. I don't believe that if you're team secret right now, you want to make that happen because you're already successful.
Okay.
So it would need a lot of money or something. I don't know. I currently wouldn't do it, even potentially with money. Okay. But I'm not the top 5 female player in the world anyway, so I wouldn't be on that ultimate team. I'll be back though. I'll be back. But yeah, I think if you want to make that happen, you probably need a lot of money. At the
Mask, is the theory too far out there?
Right now, yeah, I think because you do have your top female teams, but that's assuming that there are 5 female players dispersed throughout the entire world that are on par and at the same skill level. And I don't think that you can get together 5 females of any of these teams and say these are, they're all equal, they're all the best teammates that they could be for the other, because maybe there's like 1 or 2 of them, and then but you can't form a full team off of like those 2 or 3 people because they're just 2 or 3 people. So eventually they would have to resort to bringing on male players, because they're going to want to, if you can't really keep the same 5 lineup for, more than just a couple of seasons, because that's hard enough as it is.
Okay. So a last topic I wanted to talk about is just to give people an insight into literally what your lives are like in gaming. Because the problem with a lot of the stories that are out there, I can tell you from both sides how it is, okay? So from the women I know that are involved in esports, the ones that actually have been friends of mine and have told me stories that have happened to them in private, not trying to get attention or get people to feel sorry for them. Some of the stories they've told me were horrible, some of the things that people said to them, or some of the ways people went out of their way to like track down their Facebook and then do like stuff that's way over the line, obviously, for anyone. In these scenarios, I did feel quite sorry for them, but the problem is the reason why so many people who don't know these specific stories dismiss them is because, like I said about people pulling whatever card they have, there is a sense that women complain if there's any kind of harassment. Like if someone says, oh, you're just shit at the game, and then they mention something gendered, they just take the gendered part of that and they're like, right, it's just because I'm a woman. And so people don't feel sorry for women because they think that they're complaining too much. So rather than like argue that there's a middle ground, I just want to know like roughly what your experiences are like. Like start with you, Requine. When you play games online, what level of actual harassment do you think you get? Like, do you get really bad harassment? Do you think you get more in general? What is your sense in this particular sense, like now?
The level of harassment I would call it white noise. Like doesn't really affect my life. It doesn't really affect me. I'm not crying over it. Okay. But there's just kind of a low level of just like load into a game. Oh my God, are you a girl? I missed a skill shot. Oh, look at this idiot. Like what a bitch, sort of thing. Yeah. Like nothing serious, nothing crazy. Just a very low level of harassment. And I think everyone has to deal with that online to some degree. I don't think people who play League or online games are known for being the nicest, most polite people. What bugs me is when it's more professional. So like I'm not a gamer, I'm a writer, but I work exclusively in esports, and I sign my emails with Cassandra Marshall, and I've had people go, I'm working with a client, and they'll go, hey players, this is Cassandra, he is here to do the interviews with you, please talk to him. Okay. And that's kind of a pain. Or they'll just call me Marshall, like the complete inability to process the fact that they're talking to a woman. Like it's not a big deal.
Wait a minute,
it's
you're
never
a
something
woman?
That...
What the fuck?
Oh my God!
What have we done on the show? I thought it was 2 men and 2 women. I was trying to make it equal. I was trying to get diversity.
See,
Shit.
It's this nasally 12-year-old boy.
Well, my mistake. Okay, continue on, sir.
But yeah, no, it's just this extreme nothing crazy, nothing big. It's just this low level, annoying, like, oh, yep, there he went. He called me a he again. Or, yep, I'm feeding this game. Now they're calling me a whore. Just that level of annoyance.
Okay. missharvey, come on, hit me with it. What's day-to-day life like? Because put it this way, you were mega tilted when that BBC article came out when you checked your Twitter feed, right?
I actually completely dismissed.
Okay.
I ignored everything that happened because I didn't want to be a part of it. I didn't want it to ruin my days. Okay. It was horrible. From reading some ignorant comments from people just triggers me so much, and it's so hard to always read a comment and be like, oh, I don't care. Like to a certain point of this old BBC article, I just completely didn't read Reddit, didn't read my Twitter feed, didn't read anything. I didn't watch your videos for so long because I was scared of what it was. I just didn't want to deal with it. That's how simple as that. I do get a lot of harassment. I don't think it has everything to do with because I'm a female. I think a lot of it has to do with because I'm a public personality and I voice my opinion, and I'm obviously I create a strong opinion, whether it's hater or liker. I'm not I'm straight to the point a lot. Whether I think that it makes a difference because I'm a woman or not, I think that it actually does, but I'm sure you go through a lot of hate too because you're Thorin and you speak loud. So I think that the only difference it always has to do with my sex. And when it comes to really graphic stuff, or she was mentioning, Cassandra was mentioning about, it's instantly a cunt, a whore, instantly. Whenever I join a server, there's always a comment about me being me. And then sometimes it goes oh, I love you, missharvey, you're awesome. Or it goes to every round getting insulted that I'm a cunt, which it gets old.
Yeah.
And I can't always be on a really amazing positive mindset where like they don't touch me, like, you know, I'm human and at some point one of them will trigger me or will like hurt me or whatever. But it comes with it, I guess. It's like there's two things. There's, well, I could just shut up and not go through it, but I decide to speak up and go through it. And, you know, I don't know. I think the harassment is pretty bad, but I think it's not because it's because of online society where social media and like, you know, I don't necessarily think it's because of gaming, and I don't necessarily think it's only because I'm a woman.
Okay. Right, Masq, what do you think on this topic? What's your day-to-day like in this sense?
I never really give anybody, or at least I try to not give anybody an opportunity to at least point something out because of my gender. Usually when I go into a pug match, or like say like I queue up an ESEA to do like a pugs, like I'll go in as my alias. It's not very gendered, but like I won't really speak on the mic. I know that until like I feel that I've done well enough to speak on the mic, and I know that's a little bit odd because it's like, well, people like I just don't want to get distracted by certain comments, and I go in with the idea that I'm not going to let anybody know that they're triggering me or that maybe this comment's getting to me, because in reality, like those comments really don't get to me because I don't interpret like sexist comments online as people's actual opinions. That's just them trying to get in a reaction out of me because it's a competitive game and they want to, mentally psych out their opponent. So that's how they get you triggered and let you fall into that trap. So I don't give anybody an opportunity to do that. So I can't say that I've gone through much harassment because of that, because like I really haven't gone through much harassment in my gaming career because I have done this, because I just go in, play the game, try to do the best that I can. Occasionally I'll make comments, but if I'm not feeling it, then I won't really necessarily let it out there that, hey, I'm a female or whatnot. Like I try to like ignore, I just try to put that to the side and try to focus purely on the game because it's very distracting.
I feel that what you're saying, it just proves that there's a problem, to be honest. If she has to go through that.
Well, even like a 12-year-old kid too. Like I've seen plenty of 12-year-old kids get harassed like online because they've used their mic. Like it's not just, I mean, like for females, it's not just a female thing, but females have this females have this tendency to always place it on their gender. It's just, you're just not very, like, females themselves, like online, are not a majority. Like, nobody's really used to seeing many females play video games. But does that mean that it's a bad thing? No, it just means you're more of an oddity.
So I've got a question along these lines then for all three of you. If there were more women playing, that's the other given that people have, is that if there were more women, so in every game I played in there are women, would that stop some of the men making these comments? Because I'll give you an example, okay? When I was like, when I was about 10, I once, just off my own idea alone, no one influenced me to do this, I once went, and there used to be a number you could dial for free on public phones, and I just dialed this number, and I just said something like totally stupid to the person on the end of the phone, who actually wasn't a woman, it was just an operator, and I just said something totally stupid. And you know the reason I did it? Because I was 10 and I could get away with it. I knew there's no way someone could catch me. I was going to be out of that phone box in a minute. So that had nothing to do, like I wasn't being an idiot because like of whoever the other person was. I was being an idiot because I was 10 and I was a boy and I had the access to do this, right? So I mean, I guess my question is, even if you put like 30% of all people who play every multiplayer game are women, wouldn't like 15-year-old boys still just do that because that's kind of what they do?
Yeah, because
honestly,
it's a joke. Like it's an ongoing joke that, females should be in the kitchen, females should do this, whatnot. They're just, talking out of their asses because they know they can get a reaction out of that. So it's not that they mean anything by it. It's just they're trying to trigger people just for the sake of triggering people.
Okay.
I actually kind of disagree because, like, okay, Overwatch, right? In Overwatch, there's at least one other woman in every game I play with, right? Okay. So that already cuts down on the amount of people. If there's already women in there who aren't going to, be total jerks, that cuts down on the...
Okay, so if we just get rid of all men, we'll get rid of all harassment. Okay.
No, not quite that, but But like, so first of all, you have less people who are going to call you a cunt, first off.
Right,
And second
yeah.
of all, it kind of changes its culture. Like I've seen, hey, you tracer, you're terrible. And the tracer goes, shut up, I have 3 golds. And another woman speaks up and goes, yeah, she's doing better than you. And that kind of totally changes the tone of the game and just reduces
Okay.
the amount of gendered harassment, I think.
Miss Harvey, what do you think?
I do agree with you, Cassandra. I also do believe that society in 2016 is still extremely sexist, and that most people are sexist without realizing it, and that even women are sexist towards each other. And I do
Fancy
believe
that. Women being able to be sexist. That's an amazing concept. Keep going. Keep educating, please.
and I do believe that in the end, it's a society issue as well. So it would reduce a lot of the direct like harassment, but overall, it's a culture thing, and we aren't there yet. We're still where like women are discriminated in workplaces and offices, and it's harder for them to get leading positions and etc. And I've lived it in my game design career, which had nothing to do with esports. So and like even myself, I was sexist a couple years ago without realizing it. I would be jealous of other women of their success instead of supporting them and lifting them up, and like
Okay. Is that sexism? Is that not just what women also do?
I do believe that's because society pitched us against each other. That there can only be one good woman. That there can only be one that like the beautiful women, and it's her, and then that's the best woman, that's her, and like I do believe that it was the way that I was raised throughout high school and like these kind of things without realizing it. Like it's all like introspect. I don't know if it's a word in English, but like it's all stuff that you just can't. Yeah, you just can't see it. You can't realize it until you actually sit down, read a lot of actual interviews, research about the topic, which I've done in the last couple, I would say 2 or 3 years. And it opened my eyes to the issues that, there isn't a lot of women in gaming and esports. And if we had more women, it would definitely make a difference. But it also starts with this whole society is kind of completely tinted towards women's success, if that makes sense. And sexism is completely part of our lives without realizing it. And I know I sound like a feminist when I say that kind of stuff. And
just a bit.
Usually people online hate feminists, so whatever. But I do believe that there's a difference in just our general interactions as humans, and it would still be there, even if we had more women.
When I say this is not in any way to discredit harassment or say justify it or say it's okay, but I have actually done some research myself, right? What I tried to do was find online female communities. And I found and so I'll give you the obvious one I went to, right? I went to fashion blogs, and I went to things that are on celebrity gossip blogs, right? And I went to these websites, and what I did is I just read the comments, and I looked at the ones that had a woman's name, right? And they weren't really nice comments, A lot of them were like, she obviously has fake tits, or obviously she did implants, like, and I'd be like, whoa, what? And then the next comment would be like, you know what? Yeah, and she only said that because her boyfriend left her, and now she just like it was. They were really horrible comments, right? But they were just from women against other women, or well, against some men as well. I mean, obviously, but not men within the community. It was like, if a man's in the story, well, obviously he's just an adulterous piece of shit, so he should be killed. Really crazy comments that women themselves said. So this question is not meant to be loaded. Like, it's not meant to mean that it's okay for men to harass other men or women. But if there were lots of women who played games, wouldn't there be harassment from women as well?
Absolutely. Yeah. There was this so there was the SKT T1 press conference between the final match at Worlds, and this woman from Any Given Wednesday, I want to say it's called.
Okay.
She's like, Faker, I have a question for Faker. The question is, can I have your babies? And how much do you spend on your body, right? And those are kind of like really loaded, uncomfortable questions. Yeah. And if a man asks that to a female player at a tournament, he would probably be tarred in the streets. So like, I think women are capable of being awful, even in very professional situations. I think women are definitely capable of that, right?
Sure. I think women are vicious.
I just don't think they get the opportunity to do that, right? Because if you're 10% of the population, like, you just tend to keep your head down and stay quiet.
Okay.
and or avoid the environment altogether. So I do think women can be sort of unprofessional. They can be rude. They can be trolls. And I think sometimes they even get away with things that men would be tarred and feathered for because, they're women. Definitely. But I do think in gaming, the specific problem doesn't lie as much with women just because of the way it's set up now. In, 100 years, maybe it'll be 50-50 gender, and it'll be, everyone's just terrible to everyone. We don't know.
Yeah. Let's see, there's the dream. That's the utopia. Eventually, everyone's just a piece of shit who's just flaming everyone. Okay.
That's what I'm fighting for, yeah.
Yeah, I completely agree. In Canada, last week or 2 weeks ago, there was a female that won like Artist of the Year or whatever. I don't actually remember what happened. And she didn't wear a dress. She had jeans and she had a shirt and whatever. And the next day, all the journalists would talk about was how she should have been in proper apparel, so she should have wear a dress and took this seriously, right? But if you check who wrote these articles, it was only women complaining about how she was dressed. And if a guy had wrote that article, he would have been crucified as well. I do believe that women are vicious. I do believe we're even harder against each other. And I think it starts with us. If we want to make a difference within the female community as a female gamer, it starts with us respecting other women. How can we expect men to respect us if we don't even respect each other, right? I think the female circuit used to be extremely hard and like I said, I used this word about 4 times already, but vicious. There's so much backstab. There's so much drama within the female scene, and it's something that I came to the realization a couple of years ago, where what can I do as a human to change that? Well, I'm going to start with myself. I'm going to start with my stopping judging others. There's all this progression as a human I was doing, but I think it's important as a woman to start with each other and lift each other up and support each other's success. And maybe then we'll have the male community as well get involved. If we can't even do it ourselves, it's hard for us. It's really hard for me to say, hey, men should respect us if women can't even do it,
Okay.
I don't know. That's my 2 cents on it.
Masq, do you have any thoughts?
I guess the idea that everybody should be entitled to some sort of respect doesn't really sit well with me. I mean, you don't go on harassing people, but to demand respect just because you're a competitor doesn't necessarily warrant that you should have that respect. You have to prove to yourself that you deserve this, and even then you're still not entitled to the respect of your peers or not. So it's just, I think people should focus more on themselves rather than other people. I mean, if you're the one who wants to get to the top of the scene, like, you're the only person responsible for this, and you can't make any excuses along the way that, hey, it's discrimination, or I'm getting harassed, or what you think may be harassment, but it's just, harassment masquerading as just, or you're just over dramatizing, like, what you think is harassment when in fact it's just shit talk. Like, I guess that's what I have to say.
Yeah, I mean, that's one thing I always try to... The problem is, on the one hand, like I've mentioned already, you don't want to sound like you are justifying really horrible things. Like, I mean, I will give you an example, one of the things that someone told me that really changed my perspective on harassment. Because here's the thing, obviously, in my particular line of work, I'm a very polarizing figure. So among men, I get a lot of harassment that a lot of other men don't get, right? Maybe they get like a low level, but I will get very specific harassment. So the problem is, I thought to myself that the women who were in a similar position were getting a similar level of harassment, right? And in general, sure, most of the signal noise was the same stuff. It's just the difference is they were taking it a lot more seriously because it had the gender aspect in. So whereas someone would say that I'm like an asshole, they'd say to her like, you're a bitch, right? Now, actually, to the person saying that, they probably mean the same thing, but one of them is more gendered than the other. So the person's taking more offense to it. They think they're just saying that because I'm a woman, whereas maybe he's saying that because, just to be horrible, like they are to me. But I will say there was a level to which some of the harassment went that I've never experienced in general, right? Like one woman, I won't say who she is because I don't want to encourage or like give any attention to the person who did this, but the messages that she was getting sent by these people were along the lines, and these were obviously, I mean, these are very rare that you get messages like this, like maybe you get like 2 or 3 of these in a year, was messages like, like I'll find you, like I will literally wait until like you come outside your work, and then I will like grab you and you'll disappear into a car and then you'll be in like my sex dungeon and just like horrific shit. Like the level of detail they'd got into was like, I've never read anything along those lines. My stuff is like, even if it's really horrible, it's a comment. It's like one comment like that. It's never going into this sort of like fantasy realm depths. Okay. So certainly I can see that there is really horrible harassment out there, but the kind of point that I've noticed people have been kind of coming to here that I do want to make as like a countervailing force is that not all harassment that even might sound gendered is necessarily just sexist discrimination against women. Sometimes it's that people have chosen words that are interpreted that way, and maybe it's the equivalent of being called a shithead, but they stupidly say a woman-connected word, if you know what I mean.
I can agree with that. That annoys me, though.
Yeah.
That I'm being called a cunt instead of an idiot. It annoys me.
Okay, well, if there's one message I want to send out to everyone, if you could please just call Miss Harvey an idiot in future instead of a cunt, then that's progress. That's a step in the right direction.
Hashtag progress.
And honestly, I feel like a lot of those stories on sites like ExoJane or whatever were like, I was driven offline due to harassment, and they're talking about, people call me a bitch or a cunt or whatever, right? And I feel like when the people are talking about that in gaming, right? It's like, were they even that invested in gaming? I'll keep playing no matter how many rude words people call me, right? And like,
that's a sensitive topic if you considered all the Gamergate stuff. I think you can.
Let's not get into that, Miss Harvey. It's been going so well so far, so let's just keep going, Cassandra.
I'm just purely talking about, like, you'll see these think pieces like, I was horrified when I was playing a game of League of Legends, and someone said, go mid, bitch, and how dare they, right? And I'm like, well, you weren't that involved in the game. You weren't that interested. Like, should you have to hear that? No, but, like, that's just part of gaming. And, like, if you're in the scene and if you're familiar with gaming, you just go, okay, whatever, and you play around it, right? I think a lot of stories just get blown up by this, like, total people new to gaming and new to the culture. And you can say, the culture is bad, but it is what it is, and people are going to encounter it.
Okay.
If that makes any sense.
Yeah, I actually disagree, but I understand your point of view. I think that you can be driven too far. Sometimes there was situations where I was like, okay, why am I doing this? Like, I enjoy what I'm doing, but it's like driving me crazy with all the, like, whenever I did the DreamHack Austin panel, it was a rough weekend on the internet, so I just avoided it, and I just focus on my work. And like, you always wonder, like, okay, am I like, you always have to question yourself. And I was actually talking about it with Jason Moses a lot, and he said he goes through the same sometimes, like,
to be fair, Moses does get called a bitch a lot as well, so that's understandable. So yeah, keep going.
He says he goes through the same like thoughts, like, hey, is it worth it? Like, and then in the end, we both stayed in and we both continued working really hard for what we love. But I can understand why someone wouldn't be strong enough to go through it all the time.
Absolutely. I'm not saying that, like, they need to buckle down and deal with it and not complain. And I'm not saying it's not a problem. I'm just saying that, I think Overwatch is one of the first games where I've seen, new players, like totally new to esports, come in and not at all be sort of intimidated by that early shit talk, because they are invested and they are kind of determined to have a good time to fight it. If that makes sense.
Sure. Right. So if we're going to close the show up, I would ask this. Okay, each person just give me like a statement. It's not supposed to summarize everything that we discussed here, etc. Just give me a statement that you think would be like beneficial for people who've watched this episode, to kind of like be a focal point that you want to make a point about. Like, this is a key message I want to send, or a point. And it can be anything. It can be like a general point. It can be like a very specific point. In general, I will just say this. Don't make it like the thing of like, oh, don't be mean to people. Because like, none of the people who really do that stuff are probably going to watch this episode. Like, you can't reach those people directly with a message. So what would be give me a message for this show, Miss Harvey. What would you like people to hear who are open and they want to know what you think about something?
Well, basically that I'm tired of being portrayed as a victim within the even the community and the mainstream medias, and that I do believe that it starts with yourself. Like I was mentioning earlier, you can make a difference in your daily life and just focus on yourself. And if you're a woman and want to compete, I think it's worth it. And I want to see more women within the community because I do believe that diversity makes us stronger, which is very political to say it, but.
Everything she said before that was so good. Just listen to the other part. Okay, Requine, tell me what your message is.
My message is that we shouldn't argue about the details about, you know, are men better, are women worse, until we have sort of the scientific facts, which we don't have right now. Yeah. And what I would encourage people to do is find female players you enjoy, and I would enjoy the media to profile female players, and not profile female players in the context of being so brave for playing video games, but tell their stories and get people involved, you know, like market female players and get people involved in their stories, and make it a more appealing scene. And I think we'll see more women show up, and I think we'll see our first truly co-ed elite female player in our lifetimes. So all we can do is just try to put a spotlight on the people who are already here, and try not to worry too much about the scientific facts we don't have.
Okay. Masq, what is your message to the world?
I would say at least to the newer generation of female players, because those are the ones that are in question, that if you want to get to the top of the open circuit, don't believe that there's anything in your way but yourself, and you have to take responsibility for your success and make no excuses along the way. Even if those excuses are legitimate, you cannot let them distract you. But on that other side, that if maybe being a professional player or, you know, getting into a STEM field or some male-dominated profession is something that you have really no ambitions to do, don't lie to yourself and say you are or say that you are interested in those simply because society is forcing you to value these fields. It's counterproductive, and you just end up extremely unhappy in the end with yourself, because when you don't meet those expectations, you're really questioning, it's like, well, how am I going to value myself as a person when society doesn't value the things that I am good at? So not getting into these fields does not make you any less of a person. So go on and keep doing what you love, whether it's gaming or whether you want to be a chef or, you know, a secretary, whatever the case is. It's like, even if what you happen to do is traditionally female dominated, you just need to be honest with yourself, and only from there will, you know, people able to see that, you know, like, hey, maybe we should stop putting an emphasis in these fields when people are just simply just not interested in it.
Yeah. Okay, and my message is just going to be, right, ignore everything else I said. Forget everything I said in this episode if you must, but do this, women of the world. Crowdfund $150,000 and pay Steele to coach a female team and make a documentary about it. Have a reality TV series that follows what he's thinking every day and like interviews him when he wakes up and then before the tournament. And then I want to see like the shots in the backstage area if the team loses a game, you know, and him just like giving his speeches. Please just do that. That's the only thing that I want from this episode. If you can make that a reality, I feel like we accomplished something in this show. And that's the end of the episode. Thanks, everyone.
Hey guys, this is Patrick Carl Sattermoon. You might know me as the guy with the most IM medals in the world, or something like that. I'm also the CGO Fnatic, and you're watching Duncan Thorin Shields YouTube channel. Yeah, pleasure being here.